Arrow Season 8 Episode 1 just packs a huge punch. I mean, literally just wow. This episode was great on so many levels, and it definitely doesn't let down the hype levels that we've heard from the cast in that it would be a much more story-driven and cinematic season with the shorter episode count that we're getting. And of course, this would be the case anyway. I mean, Oliver is essentially our main man into Crisis, with even Stephen Amell saying that Crisis on Infinite Earths begins with Arrow Season 8 Episode 1. And that statement couldn't be any more correct, because I mean, that ending, guys, I mean, I knew we'd be getting teased apparently with Crisis, with people saying that online, that apparently something big happens this episode, and it's just okay. We know Arrow was going to propel Crisis even further forward fairly early on compared to the other shows, but that ending. But before I break down this episode, guys, and review it, be sure to like this video to show your support for the Arrowverse content. Go ahead and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. But let's get into this, and I really want to see your thoughts on this episode down in the comments below, just because of how insane things are getting. The beginning of this episode started off with that original Arrow pilot footage of Oliver and Lian Yu, but with a very interesting element added, of that being Batman's mask, which has been digitized over the Deathstroke mask, which they did a very good job of. But the question is, guys, what the heck? What the heck is the Batman mask doing on Lian Yu? I mean, I would love to hear your Earth 2 Batman theories as to how this ended up there. I mean, does this mean that things went down more or less the same way it did with Slade on Earth 1, but just on Earth 2 with like Bruce? I mean, I'm not saying that's the case. It's just so weird to contemplate in your head about what the heck this means. At the same time, don't read too much into it, because I don't think we're going to get any kind of answers out of it. But either way, if you think of something, let me know down in the comments below. Who knows? At the same time, as we know from previous teasers throughout the years, that Oliver Queen on this reality died, but Robert Queen became the Green Arrow. And for those of you who are wondering about, wait, Adrian Chase being the Green Arrow? Well, I'm confused. Isn't Robert Queen meant to be running around as the Hood or the Green Arrow? And for those wondering that, according to Mark Guggenheim, more than one person has worn the Hood on Earth 1, so why assume that things would be any different on Earth 2? And that's apparently the answer to that. I mean, sure, I guess, but like, what happened to Robert Queen's Hood? I mean, did he die? I mean, who knows? I guess it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. They wanted to play something a little bit different, and this gave them the opportunity to bring back Josh Segarra as Adrian Chase in this episode as the Hood, and he was really badass this episode. I mean, I loved hearing Diggle describe his Green Arrow as essentially being Oliver, Curtis, and Felicity all rolled up in one, with him knowing how to use the tech of the bunker probably better than Oliver ever could. So as we've learned more and more about Arrow Season 8 before it obviously aired, you know, we knew that Oliver would be definitely seeing some previous characters, but we hadn't quite nailed down how exactly he was doing this. I mean, was he time traveling or something else? Well, it turns out that he's returned as Oliver Queen 12 years after the Queen's Gambit went down, instead of the 5 years in hell like he did on Earth 1. Now, what we learned about the reason as to why he's on Earth 2 is because the Monitor wanted him to get some Dwarf Star particles, which is only on Earth 2 out of like the multitude of Earths, or at least this is one of the few Earths that has that very, very rare kind of element. So also insert your theories down below as to why the Monitor needs this and how he could equip it in the war against the Anti-Monitor. It should go without saying that one of the reasons that this episode was amazing within itself was just the premise of Oliver pretending to be the Oliver of Earth 2 who has now survived, and just the many differences that this entailed due to him returning 12 years later instead of 5. And there was actually quite a few repercussions of this, which are really cool for them to explore. Already this meant that Moira Queen was still alive, Malcolm Merlyn married Moira Queen, and thus, you know, made Tommy Merlyn Oliver's stepbrother. Also, due to Oliver's absence, that was unfortunately a lot longer than 5 years, Thea Queen died to an overdose of vertigo that reflects her past on Earth 1, and in doing so, this turned Tommy into the way fans have wanted to see him for a long time, in that being the Dark Archer, which I think Colin did an absolutely great job of this episode. You could just tell the energies on everyone on set, even though like they're acting, but like looking past it, it must have been such a ride for all of these characters to be together again in such a spectacular episode and premise and just story in general that was set up. So I'm just going to keep echoing this. It was just all eye candy to any fan, and the performance already from Stephen Amell entering the Queen Mansion and just seeing the waves of emotion on his face and seeing the people who were already dead to him was just compelling. I think one way to sum it up as well, it just felt like an Arrow 100th episode kind of special, but we just know we're going to be getting this more or less a few times this season. So as teased in the trailers, we got to see that different spin on the current Green Arrow of Earth 2, who is Adrian Chase, and it was just weird even hearing him say that you have failed this city before fighting Oliver in that great scene. Now this is where we got to see the reveal of Laurel, Earth 2 Laurel, or should I say Black Siren turned Black Canary in her new suit, which I still, I'm going to keep saying, I know some people don't like it, but I think it's really, really kick-ass and probably the most Black Canary-ish suit we've had on the show. It's really nice seeing how far her character has come after seeing her journey with Team Arrow the past few seasons. However, I definitely feel like the moments preceding this that they're already setting up for what I'm calling the Green Arrow and the Canary show, as they were quickly sent to the bunker after this on Earth 2, which is Laurel's base of operations and mirroring kind of Oliver's bunker, and you can spot the Canary's logo on the computer screen, and overall this kind of moment gives you a feel of what it could be like in the Canary show, just with Mia there and maybe a couple of other characters like Dinah. Now we already know that this season we are getting a backdoor pilot episode, whole episode to that show being the last episode of this season, and just seeing this stuff makes me think even more that even though it will have Mia involved as the new Green Arrow, that it will be present day. It also just makes sense, especially with the end of the episode with the antimatter, how we see the older Laurel last season, if you remember, in the flash forwards on Earth 1. I mean, at the same time, I know Crisis, you know, with what happens with the Earth merging is a factor in all of that too, possibly, but it kind of just sets up even more seeds for that future storyline. I felt like even though they were portraying Oliver as thinking the Dark Archer was Malcolm Merlyn, and by the way, it was great seeing John Barrowman again. I thought he did a fantastic job, but I just felt like it was more than painfully obvious that it was Tommy Merlyn, and you didn't even have to pay attention to the behind the scenes news, you know, prior to Arrow Season 8 coming out to kind of know that. And maybe Oliver should have known better just with the amount of differences that were in this reality compared to Earth 1 anyway. However, the motivations were very similar with how history was repeating itself with the Undertaking, and how Tommy's powerful motivation after losing Thea made him want to cleanse the Glades by destroying it, mirroring what Malcolm was doing in Season 1 of Arrow. And I think due to the grand scope of Arrow Season 8, there are so many references and funny little moments that were already present in this episode, such as when it was Adrian Chase doing like the chin-ups in the Arrow cave and Oliver was saying he was a show-off, or whether it was when Oliver went to the IT department and saw a person who looked very similar to Felicity, when really, because this is 12 years later, Felicity is already running Smoke Tech. We actually saw that Curtis was running the department instead. Then we had Dinah and Renee, who were both ultimately working for Tommy in this episode, and who were both more or less useless without the training of Oliver, and not nearly the people or heroes that they were on Earth 1. And also going back to Batman for a second, we had that moment towards the end of the episode with Adrian Chase, after how he said that he knew Oliver Queen was from a different reality. He quoted a line from Bruce Wayne saying how, if you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. Which is actually a quote from Sherlock Holmes, which is also a cool teaser within itself, because Batman being the world's greatest detective and all of that. But also another detail, it just kind of broadens the larger vigilante world building connections and how Adrian Chase has come across the Batman before on Earth 2. It was pretty funny how Diggle got involved as well, and I knew we would be seeing him from the many teasers from the cast saying that him and Oliver would be quite together this season, despite Oliver setting out to do this all himself. When we first saw him, I actually thought it would be the Earth 2 Diggle, but it turns out that Felicity had told Diggle that Oliver was on a different Earth, and in true John Diggle fashion and Oliver friendship, it was heavily emphasized quite a few times in this episode that he just wouldn't accept Oliver doing this himself, or Oliver dying in Crisis, even though Oliver very much so has embraced that that is going to happen. I think we all do love the friendship between John and Oliver, and there's going to be a lot of this to come this season, and I think if Oliver, and you know how it is very likely that he will die, it's going to be very sad because Diggle really just isn't going to accept it until it happens. And I think that moment, whenever it happens, is just going to be even more bittersweet because of what we're going to see this season between them both. Also, I thought it was pretty cool how Diggle had the interdimensional extrapolator from Cisco, which makes sense, of course, in terms of how he got there. And I actually remember spotting this back in one of the Arrow Season 8 trailers, that this could have been a way that Oliver was getting around, as I believe we saw it on the bedside table in a scene that seemed to be of him in Hong Kong. So maybe they're just going to continue using using this to get to those other episodes that will also be tributes to other seasons, like obviously Hong Kong. Ultimately though, guys, I just loved the twist and play on events from season 1 and how it matches up to what the cast have said and how the first few episodes are those homages to various episodes. That moment when Team Arrow, if you will, consisting of Adrian Chase Green Arrow, Black Canary, Diggle, and Oliver go after the Dark Archer was awesome. And then we had the moment when Oliver fights Tommy to prevent the undertaking. Arrow's stunt work is always usually on point, even though Oliver did fire a shot at Tommy, which I don't see how is meant to be a body disabling shot or perceived to be anything other than a kill shot, because he literally like caught it there. I mean, I don't know, what if he didn't catch it? And I know some of you will say, but what if he knew Tommy Merlin would catch it, but what if he didn't? It would have literally impaled his head. And then we got the speech from Oliver about darkness and light, which was great. It just sort of shows how much of a true hero Oliver has culminated into across the seasons. And this takes me back to the opening lines of the episode, which I actually forgot to mention earlier, from the Monitor. And he says how there's differences amongst people, but there's also different kinds of heroes, and the highest belonging to those known as Paragons. And they are the only hope in all creation. And I feel like Oliver has definitely earned the highest caliber hero type, if that makes sense, in terms of Paragon. Paragon just meaning a perfect example or model of a hero. And truly, Crisis on Infinite Earths does require the utmost caliber of heroes, being that of Barry Allen, the Flash, and Oliver Queen. And just before we get to that crazy ending with the antimatter, I usually leave the Flash forwards until last. And yeah, I'm just going to be brutally honest here in terms of how, you know, I just feel like they're okay. I mean, I don't really know what to say other than I just don't massively care for this stuff. I mean, I do enjoy it at times, but there were also just moments like when they returned to the bunker and then you had Mia and Zoe just hounding Connor Hawke from behind. And in the scene, it just feels like as though the acting is just so overplayed. Do you know what I mean? I mean, maybe you don't feel that at all, but I just definitely do. It isn't all the time, but it's just sometimes when there's a certain scene, it feels like the acting is way over eccentric. But then again, I am interested in seeing more from John Diggle Jr., who, as we know, is the leader of the Deathstroke gang, and his story with Connor, who was very badass this episode, especially when the future Team Arrow went to save that guy, I believe, called Vasquez. But all in all, I'm just not massively entertained, and I can't speak for everyone, but I just feel like there's quite a large majority of the Arrow fan base who kind of feels the same, whether it's to some different degrees, which is why I feel like there was quite a bit of negativity surrounding the announcement of the backdoor pilot that might go to a full series order of the Canaries and the Green Arrow show, or whatever that's going to be called. But lastly, everyone, holy crap, Earth 2 has been destroyed. I actually wasn't expecting that. I'm not sure if all of you watched The Flash, but we actually had this foreshadowed in the episode where we saw Jay Garrick's map of the multiverse, and he's actually tracking the antimatter that's spreading throughout the multiverse, and he actually predicted with its next appearance would be with this big bold arrow all the way over on Earth 2. So I don't know if any of you knew that would be happening, but yeah, like I'm still kind of speechless over this scene. Not only did I love this scene for the fact that it was really bold, I mean, I know this happens in Crisis and that's the whole premise of it anyway, but it just instantly sends the gravity and stakes of what Crisis on Infinite Earths will be like. But it also completely propels Oliver even further towards his mission. I mean, he literally just watched his family members again, even though they're not his technically version of family members, but either way, like, it's traumatic. He just watched them die again. But this also begs further questions. I mean, what happened to Harry Wells of Earth 2? Maybe you could argue he was visiting Jesse Quick, his daughter, who went to Earth 3, so maybe he's safe, but maybe they're just going to say, nope, Harry died in Earth 2, and this is what we mean by how serious things are with Crisis on Infinite Earths. I mean, I really wouldn't be surprised, because this crossover is no joke. But bottom line here, guys, what a way to end an episode. So that is what I thought of this episode, guys. Absolutely incredible way to start off Arrow Season 8. As I described earlier, it just felt like that of the magnitude of a special episode. So as usual, guys, let me know what you thought of this down in the comments below, or you can join my Discord server and talk about this with me personally. I would love to know your theories on that Batman mask and just other little intricacies within the episode and where you think Arrow is going to go after this and what could happen. But that is absolutely everything, so thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you vigilantes in the next video. Goodbye.